Does anybody have any questions about karma before I talk about it? And it'd be nice to have one or two just to understand what you understand. Nobody really has any questions? You got it? You don't need the teaching?
I think that karma is resistance to going to the next moment. The resistance. If you don't have karma, then there's no resistance.
Yeah, karma would be an ongoing experience of very subtle stress. So yes, that's part of it. We don't want it. We want to find a way to get rid of it. Yeah. That's really the point of the Dhamma. I say it in this article. Karma is the ongoing personal experience of suffering, of dukkha. So you could say that it's anatta. It's the five clinging aggregates. It is dukkha, but it's different in the sense that it describes the momentum that we carry within our own conditioned minds that's propelling us from one ignorant experience, ignorant of Four Noble Truths, to the next, unless we have something to interrupt that ignorance. Right? Is that clear? So karma is the present moment unfolding. It's what's happening in our lives, driven by past intentional actions, moderated by the present level of what we're holding in mind, the present level of our mindfulness. So if in the moment we're holding in mind, or our thinking is framed by the Eightfold Path, our minds are then inclined towards awakening. If we are ignorant of Four Noble Truths, we simply continue to produce the momentum, the karma, for giving birth to the next ignorant moment. And that's the real teaching on, or the most important teaching on rebirth. And we'll get more into that next week. But this is how karma and rebirth fit together. Karma drives rebirth. Until we bring karma to cessation, we are continuing to cultivate our own field of suffering. In the, I heard you. In the Bhava Sutta, the Buddha describes karma this way. Karma is the field, consciousness the seed, and craving is the moisture. Now think about that. So we have the opportunity to plant whatever seed we want in what is going to develop into our lives. But if consciousness is a seed, as the Buddha says, if what we're holding in mind is the seed for what is going to grow in our life, what's going to appear in our life, and the nutriment that we give it, the sustenance, is craving, we can only create further craving. Our focus is on that. And constant craving is the perfect vehicle to continue to establish a self rooted in ignorance. In fact, it requires it. Eva?
I was going to say that first part, if it is the first part where it says, that I am the owner of my karma and I'm related to it and all that, I find that so empowering because it's mine. It's whatever it is, it's nothing else can be related to it but me and my karma.
Yes,
and so I have control over it. And yes, there is that stress that sometimes it just doesn't matter. Can't do anything about it.
Yeah, and that's the important thing. Karma is not something that's being imposed on us by. Karma was talked about and used as a spiritual principle during the Buddha's time too. So the Buddha used the word karma because it was something that people understood, but he used it in a completely contradictory way. And this is just good communication, isn't it? He wasn't validating their wrong belief in karma, but he was using something that their minds were focused on and saying, no. It was a good example of their own confused mind by showing them where they were wrong about karma. So karma was, and it's still portrayed this way, mostly today. The pop understanding of karma is it's some type of punishment or reward for your actions that are bestowed. Usually the idea is that a creator God is kind of watching you do good action. He'll give you some baubles along the way, but if you do something wrong, you're getting a slap in the face. It's seen as some overarching behavior modification system, universal behavior modification system. And it's just not that. Just the idea, now think about this, that I'm living my life, doing my thing, and that whole time, there's some grand being or grand system that's monitoring everything I do. And anytime I step out of line, it's going to whack me in the behind just to show me where I'm off. But if I do something good, I might win the lottery. And there's always eye making in that belief system. And that was common during the Buddha's time. And he saw the eye making in it. So he used the term in a completely different way. In fact, he used it as a way of reminding us that if you look at your actions and the result of your actions, you will be able to see the eye making in it rather than using your actions to continue your eye making. I mean, let me start with what Eva just said, the Buddha's words. I am the owner of my actions, heir to my actions. I am born of my actions and related through my actions. Related through my actions is another way of saying that through our actions, we cling one experience to the next. They're all related, and they all form this constant chain of causation leading towards suffering. Through that one thought rooted in ignorance to the next. And it's at that point of contact of that we should practice restraint as our lives are unfolding. That's the point of karma. It's in this moment, if we are well concentrated enough and have the refined mindfulness to actually be present with our life as our life unfolds, then we can impact and bring our karma to cessation. But we have to have a way of being present with it rather than being stuck in the past or the future by our reactive, distracted mind. Is that clear? Okay. If we're going to bring our karma to cessation, we got to be where it's unfolding. My actions will determine the fortune or misfortune of my life. You could say that the entire Dhamma, and I say this a lot because when you understand the overarching context, you can see how one line can really explain the whole Dhamma. My actions will determine the fortune or misfortune of my life. Now remember, the Buddha his sole concern was to develop an understanding of the nature of suffering so that as individuals, through our understanding, we can bring our contributions to our own suffering to cessation. And that really is the entire focus of his Dhamma. The Buddha said repeatedly, I teach the nature of suffering and the cessation of suffering, nothing more. There's an ongoing argument between Buddhist scholars and all this about, did the Buddha really say that? In fact, Bhikkhu Bodhi wrote an article 3 or 4 years ago that claiming that was really one of the great misunderstandings of what the Buddha said. But then and I have great respect for Bhikkhu Bodhi, although he does contradict himself every now and then. Oh, I hope you're not listening to this. I just sent him an email asking to have a chat. So. He says that it's taken out of context because it doesn't go far enough and it doesn't get into the additional teachings. But the way I see that is these, and I don't see any teaching as an advanced teachings, but these teachings that don't fit directly into Four Noble Truths or dependent origination of the Eightfold Path. He's saying that those are advanced teachings that go beyond just suffering. And some of those would be the Satipatthana Sutta and the Anapanasati Sutta, but with a slightly different interpretation too. But when you look at those suttas and all of the suttas in the right context, you see that they all fit and they all point to what the Buddha just said. The whole point of developing a Dhamma is to have a life free of fortune and misfortune and to simply be at peace with what's occurring. Because fortune and misfortune are simply a part of an impermanent environment. If we hang our hat on it, if we're always focused on, is this moment bringing me fortune or misfortune? From the framework of a self-referential ego personality, we're always in stress and we're always going to be disappointed. Because even that fortunate moment that comes in our life and we start feeling like the gods are shining down on me, well, it's fleeting, isn't it? In the next moment or the next day or the next year or maybe the next life, all that's going to come crashing down. And because you've created an identity about how fortunate you are, when fortune no longer shines on you, what happened? Your life is awful and you can't wait to get out of it again. And you might blame yourself, or you'll blame other people, you'll blame society, you'll blame the president, or you'll find some blame for it somewhere, rather than accept responsibility and understand it's your thinking that got you there. It's not outside external events. And this is where a true understanding of karma and rebirth starts taking our focus from what's going on outside and happening to us to what am I doing that's contributing to my suffering. And that's the real significant difference between how the Buddha used karma and the way it was commonly used and the way it's commonly used today. The difference is taking that focus of the results of your actions from external view to an internal view, from a wrong view to a right view, from seeing things clearly, from taking radical responsibility for your own well-being and removing any notion that there's anything acting upon you in any way. And so even we can get into even subtle forms, and this is actually what I emailed Bhikkhu Bodhi on. He generally portrays karma. And Bhikkhu Bodhi, if you don't know, he's one of the foremost Buddhist scholars of our time. He's written great books. He's written some of the Nikaya anthologies that I have and that I reference. So again, I'm not putting him down. We have a difference in how we see this. And one of the things that he says is the idea of I'm struggling with this because I don't believe that the Buddha taught prayer, but most modern Mahayana Buddhists believe in a type of Buddhist prayer. And Bhikkhu Bodhi talks about a dispassionate response to karma, but also to be mindful that prayer can have an impact. And if prayer could have an impact on our past actions, that means that there's some outside aid. There has to be some outside agency that's intervening between my actions and my experience of the actions. Is that clear what I just said?
Yeah, but can't prayer be that basically if you prayer, almost that if you're thinking good, kind, gentle thoughts, that instead of it being some all-powering being affecting what's going on around you, but just the aura, I think there's something to do with aura, electric field, something.
Yep. Thank you, Mary. That's the difference between what most people see as prayer and what, to me, Buddhist prayer is holding in mind. You might remember this, Ken, from our little meeting a couple weeks ago. Prayer is holding in Buddhist prayer. Well, let me qualify that. Any prayer is a strong stating of intention that something happened, and in most prayer, it's appeasing to something or appealing to something for something else. Correct? And a lot of times it's altruistic. I pray for the health of the planet, or for the downtrodden. And that, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that. In that way, prayer can point our mind in a good direction. But when we recognize that intention is everything, we're going to get to this later today. I don't talk too long. Intention is really everything in the Dhamma. And so if I'm stating the strong intention that I develop the Dhamma and I remain harmless to all beings, that's the greatest gift we can bring to the whole planet. Because now we're not introducing suffering to the world. We're developing a mindful presence where we can actually be of service. So the intention to develop the Dhamma and to remain harmless to all living beings, to me, is the most powerful prayer we can take. But what Bhikkhu Bodhi is talking about is using Buddhist prayer in a ritualistic way to alter the karma that we've set in place. And that's where I disagree. And that's where I think the Buddha would disagree. Does that coincide more with your thinking, though, Mary?
Yeah, but what you're saying, I mean, in terms of the definition of karma you've given us, if you are holding in mind good, kind thoughts, doesn't that affect, I mean, that does affect your karma.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, we'll get into that a little bit more. So in the virtuous aspects of the Eightfold Path, right speech, right action, right livelihood are there. So we recognize, we have a benchmark to recognize behavior that is unskillful in relation to those skillful acts, correct? So as we start bringing our behavior in thought, word, and deed more in alignment with the Dhamma, within an overarching right view, our actions naturally become more loving and compassionate and honest. Our minds are less cluttered with our own confusion and possible misdeeds. Our minds begin to calm. And the Dhamma starts deepening in our life. We start integrating in our life through that initial modification of our thoughts, words, and our deeds. And the more we can act in that framework, in a harmless, compassionate, mindful framework, the better our lives get. So in a very practical way, there is a benefit from being mindful of good behavior. The difference is to not see it as, because of my good behavior, I'm getting some type of reward. It's because I am mindful with my behavior, I'm able to live in peace. Do you see the difference, Mary?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's what the point you're getting at. That's the point. That's what the Buddha's getting at. If we're always spending our lives trying to appease some type of spiritual system to make sure that nothing bad happens to me, there's nothing but I'm making in that. Is that clear? Okay. And so the Buddha taught this way, again, like I said before, to refute the common beliefs of his time and to also avoid the common reaction to a mind to rather than recognize wrong views and discard them, to try and fit what the Buddha is teaching and attach them to your own views and make this fit. And the Buddha realized very early on that that's what was occurring. And so he kept insisting on maintaining this framework so that you recognize that process. This came up in class on Tuesday night too, about holding a past belief of karma being a system, a universal system of reward and punishment, and then somehow trying to adapt that or hold on to that view and moderate it by what the Buddha is teaching. And of course you can't do it because they're so contradictory. So we have to get away from the notion that karma is some kind of this grand universal system, but it simply explains what's occurring in our life right now. And it helps us put our focus on, if in this moment, this is a disappointing or unsatisfactory moment, it's rooted in I-making, it's rooted in confusion. And by that understanding, we can then change it if we take responsibility for it. Whatever one continues to pursue with their thinking becomes the inclination of their awareness. Being mindful of right intention and abandoning thinking imbued with craving, clinging, and sensuality, this inclines the mind towards release. Again, the entire Buddhist teaching is reflected in that last statement. The whole point of what's occurring in this moment the potential of each moment in our lives, as our lives unfold, is the potential to awaken if we're mindful enough to do that. And that doesn't mean that we should spend our entire lives in meditation and just reading about what the Buddha taught. That's not practical unless we decide to go into a monastery. But as best as we can, we learn the Dhamma and we use the Eightfold Path as the framework for how we relate to the world, how we live our lives. And as we develop, and most of you have experienced this, as you develop the Eightfold Path, it's not so much that, okay, I'm gonna have a little bit of right intention right now. It comes as a natural expression of who you are, doesn't it? The skillful aspects of the Eightfold Path, once we've integrated into our minds, are almost like a system. And when we need right intention, when we need to be mindful of it, because we've incorporated it, we'll recognize that, yes, in this moment, I'm holding in mind the intention to recognize and abandon craving and clinging. But until we incorporate it, that's not such a natural thing. But that's the whole point of developing the Dhamma. So it becomes a natural expression of who we are. So right intention is the intention to recognize and abandon craving and clinging. That is the subtle mindfulness that we carry with each moment so that we recognize I-making as it occurs. You might want to talk about this a little bit later, based on what something Lorna said earlier today. I'm sorry, I lost my, the Buddha's words. Karma should be understood correctly. He didn't just say it should be understood. He said it should be understood correctly, meaning the way that I'm teaching it, not me, the way the Buddha's teaching it. Karma should be understood correctly. The cause of karma should be understood. What's the cause of karma? Mm-hmm. And what's the cause of craving and clinging?
Ignorance.
Ignorance. Yeah. And how do we end ignorance? Through developing understanding of Four Noble Truths. Again, everything points right back to the Dhamma, to what the Buddha taught. There's nothing external. Again, the Buddha could have used these opportunities in these talks about karma to say the most important thing you can do to improve your future karma is to give me a couple thousand prostrations and give me some hell. And I'm not putting anything down. I'm using this as an example. And pray to me often, and here's some chants that you should do, and do this and do that. And he never says any of it. He says, take to the Dhamma and awaken. Period. There's never introduction of any type of thing that could be seen as appealing to anything external, ever, in what the Buddha taught. Karma should be understood correctly. The cause of karma should be understood. This is an interesting line to me. The diversity of the results of karma should be understood. The diversity means that, and this points directly to the idea that karma is this zero-sum game, that if I do this, the exact same thing will happen to me. What the Buddha is saying about the diversity of the results is that the results of past intentional actions can manifest in almost any way. It's not the same. It's not a one-to-one thing, because of the energetic brought about in our own minds by reaction, and holding that reaction in our mind and in our bodies. We're driving the stress to appear in our life in some way. And as we react in the moment, because of that conditioned mind, we're simply conditioning ourselves further to reaction. That's karma. But understanding that we can interrupt that process directly without any external intervention is another key to the Dhamma. It's up to us. If we feel like we have a dark cloud hanging over us, bad karma, change the way you're thinking. Obviously, that's the way you're thinking. If we think we are the most incredibly blessed from above human beings, you need to change that thinking too. Because when your fortune falls away, you're going to blame an external agency, aren't you? Rather than realize it's your own thinking that's changed, or that's responsible anyway. Do you see how we set ourselves up in a trap when we think that there's something acting upon us, or we're part of this universal system of behavior modification? And I'm not trying to take us out of our environment, meaning the universe. We live in the universe. But our focus is to the external events that are playing out in the universe, rather than internally what's occurring in our own minds. That's clear? And so you think of the simple action of meditation. What is it? It's bringing our mind and body together in this moment and deepening concentration. It's putting us in our place. It's bringing us where we are. It's the only place that we can make change, is being present with our life as our life occurs. You've heard me say it often. If you're in New York and you want to get to Chicago, but you believe you're in Los Angeles, you can't get there. You have to know where you are to get to where you're going. Right? The Eightfold Path is a way of clearly understanding, without any ambiguity, where you are in your life. Seeing yourself in relation to the ideal of awakening. And the Buddha tells us how to know the difference. The diversity of karma should be understood. Cessation of karma should be understood. That's the whole point of the Dhamma. We should actually have the experience. The Buddha said repeatedly, if you could not achieve these things, I wouldn't teach them. So the Buddha is not teaching something that's out of our reach as human beings. He taught a Dhamma that any human being could develop if they had the wholehearted intention to do so. The path developing the cessation of karma should be understood. And of course, that's the Eightfold Path. That's as far as I want to go today. It's enough on karma. But is there any questions about what I just talked about? Okay, what I'd like to know as we go around the room, how's your practice going? But do you understand, or do you have any questions about this understanding of karma that we talked about? Ken, it's good to see you this morning. And do you see how karma fits into the whole picture of the Dhamma?
Practice is going a little distracted this week.
Yeah.
But I do have a much better understanding of karma.
Good.
Like I said, before I started coming here, everything I've done with Buddhism and meditation has been what I've read in various magazines. And for every book or magazine you read, you get a whole different opinion, way of looking at things, and this is great for you to actually hear somebody say it.
You don't need to respond in a way to make me feel good. Does it make more reasonable sense to you what you heard today rather than what you've been?
Yes, especially the whole part about my good actions today are not going to change my bad behavior. It's not whatever I do today to improve my karma is not going to change what I did in the past. You know, it's that I've read a lot of things where there was that understanding. The better I am today, it will erase what I did in the past. Make me a better.
Yep.
You know, it wasn't the fact that I never really put the whole thing together where it's just the way I think about it.
Yeah.
And the way you explained it, and again, I think I may have told you this before, I've done a lot of reading in the Taoist tradition. And it's the whole Wu concept.
Mm-hmm.
You know, drifting with current. You know, if your life is a river, sometimes the river's calm, sometimes it's rough.
Yep.
But you're there either way because it's how you go through it.
Yeah.
And for me, it's just keeping my head above water most of the time, waiting for it to slow down.
The Buddha uses a very similar metaphor to that at times, using the river. Yeah, and so then I didn't ask you that question to make to prove a point, only to show that the Buddha taught something that we can actually use. It's something that makes sense. A spiritual system doesn't necessarily have to be logical. A lot of them aren't, but this one happens to be. You know, the brilliance of this awakened human being was that he saw a way to put the Dhamma in a way that a human mind could logically understand and make use of, and not just be conceptual. Most of what the Buddha had learned from the spiritual teachers, it was all conceptual. It was all, I mean, I would say all imagined, you know, or imaginative in its application. The Buddha taught something that was entirely practical, and that's the difference. And so that's why karma is an entirely practical teaching. Lisa, good to see you this morning. Thank you, Ken.
Good to see you too, John,
Good.
and everyone.
Yeah.
When I was reading the section, I read you acknowledge karma's there, and however it was described, I said, oh, that's exactly the way you described dukkha. And then the next line was, you said, this is exactly the same thing as there's dukkha, there's you acknowledge it, you can have the cessation of it, and they describe karma exactly the same way.
Yeah.
And it makes perfect sense to me.
Good.
No, I mean, it just does. It just does. I don't know why. I'm not sure I really understand it, but there's just something about the way it was described, and what you said is, because no matter what's happened in the past, it's what you're doing right now that is the most meaningful.
Yep. Yep. Always.
And maybe you can overcome whatever it was, good, bad,
Yep.
whatever happened in the past just was, is, and whatever happening now is, and that was. And it's interesting about the river, metaphor.
Yeah.
Is always good.
Yeah.
Because it's never the same water.
No. It's the diversity of karma.
But if I understand it, maybe I have no idea. Maybe I'm simplifying it too much.
No, it is that simple. In fact, the Dhamma is that simple. It's almost so simple that we have trouble accepting it, that this could be these simple and straightforward and direct answers when you really look at it. Can it really be? But it is. It is. At that point of understanding karma and utilizing that understanding for our Dhamma practice, it's at that point that we move away from ignorance and start moving towards awakening. And so when we do that, in that moment, the effects of karma are altered. They're changed. They're moderated. And getting back to this idea of a zero sum, if I did this, that's going to have to happen to me in the future. The best example of that would be the murderer Anguttara Nikaya. He had this reputation. You probably heard me tell this story a few times because it makes a good point in different contexts. Anguttara Nikaya, the murderer. Anguttara Nikaya he had this reputation of being just this bloodthirsty human being. So much so, and he so loved what he did that when he killed someone, he cut one of their fingers off and he made it, and he hung it around his neck. And he made this necklace of bloody fingers. And he had 99 one day, at least so the sutta says. And he's walking down the street looking for number 100. And he sees a Buddha coming at him the other way. And he says, that'll be number 100. And he starts moving towards the Buddha. And I mean, this is all told in kind of a metaphorical language. And he couldn't seem to really catch up to the Buddha. The quicker he walked, it seemed like the Buddha stayed the same distance. Until all of a sudden he was upon the Buddha. And that whole time that he's thinking, I'm going to kill him, I'm going to kill him, I'm going to kill him. And you think about the metaphor. The whole time he's holding this in mind, he's missing the fact that he's walking up to an awakened human being. He missed even that in his life because he was so preoccupied and distracted by his own need to murder. He comes up upon the Buddha. The Buddha had this, because of his incredibly mindful presence, he could assess people. Much like sometimes you meet people and you just know all about them. They're good or bad. You just get a feeling. From the Buddha's awakened state, he understood. The reason why I'm saying it like this is the Buddha's often given superhuman powers. He could read minds and all this stuff. That's not what it was. And the Buddha never claimed that. What he said was because he was so mindfully present and so well concentrated, he simply could understand another human being. Just like we can do when we're mindfully present. We understand people. We can get a feeling for them when we allow ourselves to be present with them. So Anguttara Nikaya meets the Buddha on the road. He's ready to kill the Buddha. The Buddha notices this. And there's something overcomes Anguttara Nikaya. And he can't act. He's just struck by the countenance of this awakened human being. And the Buddha uses the opportunity to briefly teach Anguttara Nikaya the Dhamma. And he gives him a very brief introduction to the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, instilling in his mind that there's another way of living in the world that is free of the stress of your own struggles, your own ignorance. Anguttara Nikaya understood immediately and awakened on the spot. He never harmed another soul. And he went on to become one of the most senior monks and important people in the Buddha's Dhamma. He did not have to, the reason why I told that whole story today is that, notice that Anguttara Nikaya did not have to get murdered 99 times to set the scales, to balance the scales. What he needed to do was to awaken. And the past he's not dragging the past around with him anymore. He's no longer attached to it. And so it's no longer affecting him. Karma has been brought to cessation for Anguttara Nikaya. And it's just such a perfect example of that idea that karma is a zero-sum game. Of course it's not. And how could it be? You know, when you understand the 3 marks of existence, everything is impermanent and uncertain. Nothing can be established that is directly definite. Everything's in a constant process of becoming, or the Buddha's Dhamma wouldn't make any sense. And if everything, and most importantly, who we are, is in a constant process of becoming, then karma can't be permanent, can it? It can't be determined. It can't be established. It always relates to the present level of our mindfulness, what we're holding in mind. Gary, good to see you this morning.
Good to be here. Wow. As far as how my practice is going, the original question is, I feel I'm very much so a novice. I feel that it's going well because I'm here and I'm present, and I want to take it all in. So there's a lot more for me to take in. I've said it before, but certainly I appreciate the times that you've gone back over things, because the way my mind works, a lot of this stuff is out here and I'm still back here trying to take it all in. But a lot of certainly I'm going to go back and listen to this recording again today. But a lot of what you touched base on today really struck with me, as well as resonates and are things that challenged me as well.
Good.
A few things is question on prayer. I had the same thing. So certainly I'm going to have to give that more thought and meditation to that. Exterior forces. And certainly that from my upbringing and what prayer meant to an exterior force, and what you were supposed to get out of that, my entire upbringing, certainly that never registered with me or resonated with me. So to be here and to hear that input now is a bit, I have to get a lot more into that because it really rings with me. The other thing is, and use the phrase that I use, and now it's challenging me the way that you used and what you described it to is hang your hat on. So the positive aspects, and I try and give that to others of when they're going through their struggles, and I say, hey, what's positive? And I don't use the term blessed, but I hear it frequently used. But I always use the term hang your hat on the positive and go from there. So you said some things today and this morning that challenges me on that. So certainly I'm going to have to look back on that and look how to be more in the moment and go from there.
Great. Thank you, Gary. A few things you brought up. You're developing the Dhamma just as it should. You hear the things over and over again, and it just slowly sinks in. That's the way it is for most of us. You know, I can't tell you how many times I went through dependent origination and it was just a mess in my head. I just couldn't. But when I finally understood it, to me, it's the most plain thing out there. It's just, you know, how could you not see it? But I had to have the context, and for me and that's just the way the Dhamma is. There was something else you said.
There's an analogy I use that for me that I use with that that comes up to me frequently, and that I work in the food business, and frequently I work with a lot of chefs and people who know formulas and recipes and that sort of thing, and I like to cook. And sometimes I just start pulling things out and just start cooking, and I know somewhere along the line that came to me somehow from somebody, but I don't know how or what. When, and it then just comes natural. So in some part, as I said, I'm a novice, but I hope that some things just come natural after absorbing all this.
Yeah, it's just like that. You know, you'll know when it's time to grab the thyme and, you know, put a little sugar in. It's just it just becomes just a natural expression of who you are. To get a little bit more into prayer, it's really just the intention behind the prayer. There's been medical studies that have shown that they say that prayer has actually helped people in surgeries and situations like that. And I have no problem with that. I can understand that that's a very real possibility and a probability, simply understanding how consciousness works. But to me, that doesn't mean that because I said, please help so-and-so, and that person was helped, that something intervened besides just a conscious human being. And to me, that's enough. Do you see what I'm saying? That I don't need to interject an interlocutor in there. It's just a one-to-one. This is our life. And this is, the idea of not beating it up. Modern Buddhism says that we are all one grand cosmic being. We all can be reconciled into one thing or one thought. That's a wrong view. But the idea that we are connected by our experience, by our humanity, is very real. But that's not something that is a part of Dhamma practice, or we can create great clinging over that. It's simply an obvious truth. We're all human beings, aren't we? We're all in this together. We're all stuck in dukkha. That's enough of a connection. I don't have to imagine some connections to be connected to all of you. But there's nothing Dhammic about it. It doesn't, it's like saying most oranges are orange. Okay, that's true. And most people suffer. Okay, that's true. There's the connection. But because I'm connected to you through suffering doesn't mean anything except I better deal with my own suffering because it affects you, doesn't it? Thank you. Lorna, good to see you.
Good to be here. Thank you.
See you next week.
Yes. Bye.
Have a good weekend. Give me a call.
Okay.
I think what you were referring to earlier is that this week I started a project at home, and the Buddha always cautions about ideas. Yeah, when you have an idea, possibility of making around your idea is endless. You really can get a high on it. You can really think of yourself, this is my idea, I've done this, and you can sort of get on a bit of a high with your ego when you come up with an idea or a new recipe. That sort of stuff, and I was sort of had an idea at home this week, and started a project, made a project, put materials together, made the project, finished the project. But when I was doing it, I realized that I thought of this idea. I was, I was feeling good about myself because it was my idea. It was my thoughts had done it. So I realized that I was obviously making. So I got to be thinking about what was actually occurring, and what was actually occurring was I have gone on in my life, and now today I need this project fixing. So all I was doing really was just meeting life as life occurs, and I had never come across this situation before. It was a new situation in my life before, and really what was happening, I was just dealing with life as life occurs. Yeah. So in the possibility of all the making I could have done, I would have missed that actually I was just dealing with life, as the Buddha said. Yeah. And that's about my tale. It's a great tale. You describe the results of Dhamma practice and being able to be mindfully present with projects, that's the point, is to be dispassionately and impersonally present with life as life unfolds. And people say, what happens to me in all that? You got to try it. That's Buddha's ehepasiko. And he said that because he understood that feedback loop that we all have in our minds, because he described it in his own awakening, and you have to get past it. And it really is just that, that we need the courage and the conviction of the Dhamma to do that. We can. Thank you. Eva, good to see you this morning. How are you?
It's wonderful to be here. Great to be with everyone. My meditation is and has been always haphazard, but consistently haphazard.
Good.
And like you said, things in life happen, and I know that it's happening because I have the basis of meditation and the foundation that's built up on. As far as one of the lines about how karma doesn't guarantee the results. What was that way? But whatever you do at the end, okay. Well, let me explain how I understood it. Was that I'm with somebody and something's happening, and I say to myself, well, I'm going to do this in order to improve this situation for this person. And then I've done this thing. At the end, I find that what I thought was the improvement for the action that would improve the situation has not done what I anticipated.
Yeah.
And then it's almost like the realization that sometimes just because I think that a certain thing has to be a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that that's correct. And I can really stop. And I don't know. And stop, I guess, just stop. Sometimes stopping is just the best way to go.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is that as far as prayer is concerned, I was raised Catholic and, petition the Lord in prayer. And I never thought that was right, and that's just the aspect of my, experiencing my Christianity and Catholicism. But then I now look at the idea of prayer as more as an affirmation. I'm not asking for anything for anyone. I'm just affirming a positive place or way. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I don't look at it this way for myself, but in the way I describe prayer, prayer is holding the intention that something occur. As a Dhamma practitioner, we're always in prayer, then, aren't we? We're always holding in mind right intention, and that and right intention is the intention to abandon all selfishness, really. And there couldn't be a higher prayer, could there? Diane, good to see you this morning.
Oh, it's good to see you and be here too. Thank you. I don't know. I think I have trouble being subjective about things, and I have to do what I call as some investigation into things. And this week I found myself just utterly refusing to meditate. I mean, the resistance was mega, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go to Google and resist meditation and look up a couple articles. So I looked up a couple of articles, and one of the articles said it's not personal. Resistance is not personal. And I thought, okay, I can get a handle on that. And then from there, it's funny, I don't know how things go when I Google, the Google spirit takes over or something like that. But I got into things like narcissism and being raised as the scapegoat in the family and the clown, and having narcissistic parents and what all that meant. And I realized a bunch of conditioned thinking that I've had. I mean, a lot of that was what I was raised with, conditioned thinking. But I mean, I didn't have a label or something that I could look at, and I could then take a look at, what is going on in my life today, what is happening today, and my, I tell my son that I'm happier than I've ever been in my life, and he looks at my situation financially and thinks that I'm lying, and how can that possibly be? And I realize that I don't have to do anything about that. I can just keep, being in the moment and doing what I'm doing. And I was sitting here listening and criticizing everything in my mind. And all of a sudden I thought about, I just became a child and remembered whenever I was talking or anyone was talking. I mean, when we came home from church, my parents always criticized the minister, the sermon, or somebody else who was there. And when we prayed around the bed at night, it was telling God what to do stuff. And
Did it work?
I remember my mom saying this phrase, confound and confuse the forces of evil and bring their works to naught. And it took me a long time to figure what that was, because I was a little kid and didn't understand some of those big words and stuff like that. But no, it didn't. And I'm not even going to go there. What I was realizing was, so much of what I was raised with is my conditioned thinking. And when I start, it's like coming intuitively. The last time I talked to my son, he started to demean me, and I said, thank you. And I just said, thank you for the rest of the conversation. And I found that the emotional, stress that usually went with that kind of conversation was not there. And it was an amazing thing for me to just let that go. There's nothing I can do about that. And just to be able to say thank you. And just some of these things that recognizing what my, personal conditioned thinking is, and whatever, what maybe I need to know where it came from or whatever it is. But I'm beginning to take a look at it and say, okay, that's where that came from. I don't have to do that anymore. And it's just, to me, that's what was hearing you say, the personal responsibility is I can choose to do those things, choose to be in uncomfortable situations, I have choices. And my whole life, I didn't think I've been talking, I think, for years about choices, but I never really, it's like I walk around my house now thinking I have choices.
Well, do you see how that conditioned thinking is fueling or feeding your karma?
Well,
it's creating the events in it's creating the experience of the events of your life. It's not creating the events. Do you see that? That's the important thing, because then it doesn't matter what's going on outside you, using just it doesn't matter what your son is saying or anybody else. That's all external stuff. It's only personal, and it only affects you when you take it personally. So when you let people be who they are, don't put any, that's what conditioned thinking means. Don't put any conditions on the world. Then you are diminishing the effects of karma. You're diminishing your experience because you're not setting yourself up in your own mind for that. And that's the important thing to remember. It's nothing's going on out there that we should take personal. It's not that way. Especially when we understand the nature of dukkha. When we understand that when the Buddha describes dukkha, it applies to everybody. It applies to the world and the people in the world. So other people are in their own state of dukkha, and which means they're in their own state of confusion and deluded thinking to some extent. And so when they act in a way that is aberrant but not hurtful to me, I can stay present with it because I understand it. I mean, what I mean by when I say it's not hurtful to me, it doesn't mean that we should stay in situations that are harmful, whether physically or mentally abusive. Just because we're a strong Buddhist, we don't put ourselves in harm's way. We have the sense to realize this is simply an unskillful situation. I'm leaving. But when it's simply dealing with another person's delusion, a son or a situation, we understand it. We understand where they're coming from. We don't take it personally because we understand our own stuff. And so we don't contribute to our karma or that other person. So thank you, Diane. Mary, good to see you this morning.
See you. I've been good with my practice. practice, I resist those temptations to not, and just to not meditate and tell myself to sit down. It's 10 minutes. I usually do 10 minutes twice a day. There's no reason why you can't do this. And come on the other end feeling like calm and, more level. I mean, it kills me the way people use karma, the way they use that to mean, something bad or something good. It just, I've given up telling people, or I'll just say under my breath, well, that's really not what karma is, but whatever, I'll restore it. And I just let them go on. There's no point in trying to, and sometimes there's some people, there is a point in trying to educate them, but in most people, they've already made up their mind. So I'm not going to get into a tizzy over it because it is what it is.
Yeah. And that's just the way to see it, isn't it? To look at karma as punishment. And while you were talking, my mind just flashed back to a few years ago. They had that tsunami in Japan, and thousands of people got killed. And I remember, I just happened to be listening to the news when it happened, and the commentator said, "Boy, those people must have bad karma." What an awful thing to say. And to think that there's some universal system that would say this whole population of people are so awful they should be drowned. I mean, how can you think that way? Well, and I remember, and I think I wouldn't be that when the AIDS epidemic struck, and I was in my late teens when it struck, in mid-20s when I'm an ordained minister, but the only reason I became in a Christian lineage, the only reason I did that is because at the time I felt so strongly. There was such fear about AIDS that even people in hospitals were isolated. You couldn't go near them. We didn't know. We thought that you could just breathe the air and you're going to get AIDS. And it just so bothered me that, I'm sorry. I was seeing and it was really concentrated for me in New York, that people were thrown in hospitals and they were mostly like they were locked away. They just really let people die. It was awful. And I just felt like I needed to go into these hospitals just to approach these people and say, hey, there's another human being here. So I did that. That's why I got ordained. So I had the credential that I could walk into a hospital basically whenever I wanted. It just killed me that they portrayed that whole thing as retribution for being gay. And these are, you can feel it. It's not anger in my voice. It's frustration that human beings can think that way. How can you go that far? I mean, I can understand you make decisions based on what other people are doing, and okay, you got to live with that. But to make statements like that's the result of ignorance on a societal scale, and because we're not willing to look at that, and how ridiculous can you? I'm going too far with this. I'm sorry. A misunderstanding. But again, the point is that this misunderstanding of karma allows us to say things like that, and it gives us power now. I've just decided the reason why those people are suffering is because they're evil, and I know. What a deluded way to think, and the hurt that it does, the harm that it brings to our society. So, excuse the speech, but we need to wake up. So, thank you, Mary, for inspiring that. Jay, it's good to see you.
In my mind, I guess I think of karma without any value judgment as just being like a file cabinet with good, the bad, the ugly that occurs as you go on along. The thing that, in relation to your teaching here, that I can't get my mind around is that you could ever stop karma at that point, because it's what's happening to you. Now, you can change your subjective experience of it, how you feel about it, but you can't stop it unless you're dead. So, how does that work? I mean, I just don't get that. That's a paradox to it.
No, that you're describing the point. The motivation of our past intentional actions continue to manifest in our lives, but because we have now taken control of our thinking, we don't react to it. And so no further conditioning of our mind will take place. Eventually, over time, as we continue with Dhamma practice, we'll let go of all of that craving and clinging, those ignorant views, and we'll free ourselves from a reactive mind. That's all. It's not magic. It's taking our mind from a reactive, distracted mind to a calm, well-concentrated, and peaceful mind. That's the difference between an unawakened human being and an awakened human being. It's the same mind and it's the same life that is unfolding. You're just seeing it differently.
Just how you look at it.
That's you're going from wrong view to right view, which is that's the Dhamma. That's why the Buddha started the Eightfold Path with right view, to get us moving towards that and understanding that it's the way that I'm looking at things that's causing the difficulties in my life. Nothing more. But I'm looking at things in a way that cause difficulties because I don't have a proper perspective. I'm looking at them from wrong view. And the Buddha taught a way to develop right view, a way of looking at the world in a reasonable and realistic way, including karma. Thank you, Jay. Debbie, good to see you.
Good to be back.
Good to have you back.
I struggled this morning to stay awake because I have a lot of time lag here from my travel. So I'm like 3 hours earlier. I'm not awake yet. But I felt like I was able to experience some of this, what we're talking about, on my trip to the Northwest, because I spent a lot of time being away with my 3 sisters and lots of different personalities and things going on. And it was really a really amazing experience. More bonding than I've had in a long time. And I think part of that was because I was less reactive to thinking about it differently, less reactive. Therefore, you know, the experience was better because I was less reactive to our personalities, our differences, you know, and able to just sit with things more and hear things more. Anyway, so I had a really wonderful trip home with them and visit with them, and I was able to keep doing my meditation once a day out there, morning. That helped too, you know, to just take that time for myself in that experience. So I'm pretty well. Just need to readjust my time difference.
Yeah, it takes a while. I'm glad you made it this morning. Yeah, I used to do a lot of traveling, go to Hawaii often, and I never had any trouble flying out to Hawaii or jet lag or anything like that. But coming back, it took me 2 weeks to get back into it. Maybe it was because of the difference in environment too. But boy, what a great class! Thank you all for that. And any other questions about this idea of karma? I wanted to mention to you, Gary, that on the page on the website on Karma and Rebirth, towards the end of last summer, we went through a series of 7 classes on Karma and Rebirth. Talk about beating a dead horse. There's those 7 talks are there too if you want to get into it. You know,
There's more to come, correct?
There's more to come. These are all up there too. So, yeah. So okay. And Eve, I wanted to ask you: did you notice the new instructions in the meditation today?
Yes. Oh, yes. About the in-breath.
Yeah, so those came over the summer. We went through a series of 7 or 8 classes on a sutta called the Anapanasati Sutta, the sutta on breath awareness. And I changed in fact, I waited to change the instructions until we went through that as a class. But that's one of the key suttas in the of the Dhamma, and that's linked on the webpage too. If you want to just listen to it, you'll understand where they come. But it relates directly to the 4 foundations of mindfulness and the 3 marks of existence, and a reference impermanence and recognizing that through recognizing the impermanence of our feelings and our thoughts and the impermanence of our breath. And that brings us into the understanding of impermanence. So that's where that came from, just so you know. Okay. We'll finish with metta as we always do. Next week, we're going to, our class will be on rebirth. And we're going to have 2 classes on that. There's, next week will be, I'll be talking on rebirth that's mentioned in the book. And then there's 3 suttas that I've been writing an article about, combining these 3 suttas. And hopefully I'll have them done so we can, we'll talk about that in 2 weeks here. So, all right, we'll finish with metta. Our retreat's coming up soon, May the 17th. If you're going, I hope you are. Sign up soon, please. So, okay, find your relaxed meditative posture. Gently close your eyes and gently close your mouths. And take a moment again to become mindful of your in-breath and your out-breath. And these are the words of the Buddha from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and truthful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing, in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class today. Peace.